Welcome. It's great to have you here for this guided meditation and talk. My name is Jonathan Foust. Grateful that you have made the time to be here. And before we launch, we have the traditional thank yous. First of all, thank you. And also to thank the producers for this following meditation and talk. A big thank you to Glenn Harrison and Leo Gimo for putting all this together. Also, a big thank you to our mindful movement teacher. If you were able to take part in that, we have three wonderful mindful movement teachers who teach at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, Rita, Anna, and Lynn. And a big thank you in advance to Ray Manioki and Tara Cassidy, who offer mindful dialogue after this talk, which is a great way to connect with other people, share about your practice, share about the talk, and that is at about 8:50 Eastern Standard Time. Those links, the Zoom links to Mindful Movement and to Mindful Dialogue are on Facebook, my Facebook page, and on my website. Also, a thank you to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington and to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington, which has been the host of Monday Night Meditation for so many years. To let you know as well that I have a monthly newsletter, which gives a summary of all recent talks, other resources, stuff like that, plus my photography for the month. And also a big thank you for your support, because this is all offered freely in the whole spirit of making sure that these practices, which could be so transformational, are freely available to anyone who's interested. And your support truly helps make that happen and also supports me in my lavish lifestyle. So thank you for that. You can make a donation via, I think it's probably in the description of this talk, but also on my website. So very, very grateful to have this time to share these practices. And also just to say, I'm really excited about this series we're exploring on inquiry. It's been a really deep part of my practice for many, many years, and I'm really having fun, and hope you're finding this engaging as well. So, with that, let's consider moving into some meditation. First of all, you might ask yourself, since we're exploring inquiry, is your body ready for, what's it going to be, about 26 minutes of meditation? There are a couple ways you can prepare your body, and that is just ask your body, what does it need right now? It might want to stretch, you might want to move around. Your body may say, I would really like to not be here. So you might bring in a little bit of mental energy, but reach your arms overhead, stretch out, whatever feels good. Nice to let in any sounds. And as you're ready, if you like, you can close your eyes. Sometimes it's really helpful to let your body sway a little bit to the left and right. Find that little midpoint where you're centered, and then a little back and forth. If you let yourself just gently rock back and forth. A couple other little things that I like to do in preparation. One is to imagine that I'm sending all of my awareness right to the base of my skull. And sense if you can relax. Can you relax right here along the occipital ridge, right along the base of the skull? And as you relax, can you imagine your shoulders dropping, falling away from your ears? Feel the weight of your arms. You might even just sense the space between your shoulder joints down through your elbows. And your elbows down through your wrists. And if you imagine your arms heavy, like heavy drapes, and if you imagine the weight of the arms gently inviting your shoulders down and away from your ears, and if you relax the back of the neck and the base of the skull, can you imagine a lengthening? You're relaxing and lengthening through the back of the neck. As you do so, you may notice this may help you to it's very subtle, but you may notice your chin now kind of parallel, the jaw parallel to the floor. And this natural invitation to move inward. How intimately can you relax right now? Softening from the inside, the forehead. Sensing from the inside all the little muscles around your eyes. And you might sense, can you feel or imagine the space between the back of your eyes and the back of your head? Can you feel or imagine the space or the distance between the crown of your head and the tip of your chin? And as you do so, is it possible to soften or relax your jaw? If you relax your jaw, can you now begin to feel all the subtle muscles of your face beginning to relax, soften? In particular, you might just sense, is it possible now to relax your tongue? Let your tongue relax and fill your lower jaw. Feel the volume of your lips. Sensing from the inside now your head inside the skull. Can you sense now the space inside your throat? And as you feel the effortless movement of breath, is it possible to feel the space inside the lungs as you feel the lungs expanding, contracting? Can you sense from the inside now the lower back and the buttocks? And the space between your navel and your spine? And sensing down into the lower abdomen. Feeling now the floor of the pelvis. Feel the hip joints. Sensing from the inside now, from the hip joints down through the knees. The knees down through the ankles. The tops of the feet and the toes. And sensing now the soles of the feet and the heels. You might like to now bring your attention to the backs of your hands, noticing any tingling pulse sensation here. And sensing now the volume of your palms and fingers and thumbs. If you relax and soften the hands, and if you bring the awareness inside the hands, what do you feel? What do you notice? Any tingling or pulse, vibration or subtle energy? Is it possible to soften or relax inside even more right now? And you might now reflect on an anchor, just exploring right now what sounds are the most dominant. And where do you feel the breath the most dominant on the inside? And where do you feel sensation the strongest right now? And in your own time, you might select one of these anchors of sound or breath, or perhaps even sensation. Quite often, the palms of the soles of the feet can be a wonderful anchor. And as you move into your practice now, let this be your primary attention. The mind, of course, will wander into commentary and narrative and planning and review. The practice is to notice that with a gentle smile and to invite your attention to come back to the embodied sense of here and now, the feeling on the inside of your anchor. When you notice your mind lost in commentary or in a thought form, Is it possible to meet this with a gentle smile? Invite your attention again back to your anchor, and at the same time to soften to the whole body, re-arriving. The sense of homecoming can be a wonderful thing to reinforce and practice. What could soften right now? And if you bring a particular sense of softening or relaxation to your anchor from the inside, you might just sense how rich, how intimate your anchor can be. And this blend of deep relaxation and alertness is part of the formula for arriving again and again. You might explore a certain phenomena that can occur, and that is to notice your attention on your anchor. And notice the awareness of the periphery or the background. This awareness of the background or the periphery is the awakening of mindfulness, this capacity to observe what is changing without preference. Aware of the phenomena of sensation, of thought forms, of emotions, of even different states, and even a sense of who you are as the meditator. You might, from time to time, toggle your attention from your anchor to this widening, broadening sense of presence. Observation without judgment. Awake to what is changing, and at the same time is sensing what it's like to let things be. What is happening right now? Can you name it in a word or two? Is it possible to let it be? There's some classic questions you can ask to refresh the practice. As you sense through the whole body right now, is there anything that could soften or let go inside? Over the next 3 breaths, how intimately can you experience your anchor from the inside? Can you sense what it's like to take the seat of the witness or the observer? Can you sense the foreground of your anchor and the background of everything that is changing? And is it possible to let your experience be what it is, letting things change naturally in its own organic flow. Rested and alert. As you sense inside and as you sense the movement of the mind, is there anything that could relax or soften or let go right now? And is there anything that could soften, relax, or let go even more? Releasing all technique, how much more could you relax and feel and let be? You might very gently let your breath begin to deepen, sensing what may have shifted for you in the last little while of turning attention inward. With your eyes closed, you might let your head drift a little bit to the left and to the right. And sensing the movement from the inside, and very gently now, let your body begin to move in any way that feels good, releasing this posture of meditation. Feel free to reach your arms overhead, let out any sounds. During that meditation, I'm not sure you could hear it through the microphone, but there just sounded like there was a jet making circles around the house. So I got to explore guiding myself in equanimity. Now, of course, it's gone. Perfect timing. Well, welcome. There is a classic teaching story that I love, and it's a story about a Dharma debate. This is a kind of a philosophy debate between a Korean master and a Tibetan master. Very different styles, very different presentation. So they're there in this room to have this conversation, if you will, or debate. In some traditions, like Dharma debates, they're real and they're intense. So they're there, sitting across from each other with their translators. And the Korean master decides to start things off. He picks up an orange and he says, "What is this?" It's a big pause. And the Tibetan is speaking with his translator, looks at him, and the Korean master, with a little more fierceness, is holding the orange. He goes, "What is this?" Again, through the translator, back and forth between the Tibetan master and his translator. And then finally, the Tibetan translator says, "What is his problem? Don't they have oranges where he's from?" I love that question because the general topic of what I'd like to explore is, how do we know anything? How do we know what's true? I'm very excited about exploring questions and how they influence awareness. And when it comes to this whole thing of what we know to be true, there's this wonderful quote from the master Adida, who said, no one exactly knows what anything really is." What an interesting thing to try on. So what I would like to talk about in the time I have with you is, first of all, again, usually, and I like to break this down into 4 parts. The first part is, what do you really know for certain? Secondly, I'd like to ask this question, explore this question. When you look to your experience, what do you actually discover? Third, well, who is the one that's knowing what this is? And knowing and not knowing, how can we actually embrace not knowing, kind of as an approach, as a path? So as I share with you now, what was to be a very short military operation in Ukraine, intended to topple the current government quickly and install a government subservient to Russia, is now in this protracted stage. And I imagine, like you, I've been horrified. I can't believe that this is actually happening. And I'm following all this with kind of a broken heart and really wishing all those who are suffering ease. It's so interesting with the access we have to information to really kind of get the human experience of what's going on, from those who are being bombed and shot at to the conscripts who are confused and not sure why they're there. It's just horrifying. I'm not an expert in foreign affairs, but from what I have read, there are some serious miscalculations on the part of Russia or Putin. He dramatically miscalculated the speed in which his forces could take Ukraine. He miscalculated the apathy and lack of cohesion of NATO and the Western nations. And he miscalculated the indifference of the Russian people. The result of these miscalculations is this horrible destruction that we're witnessing, and this sowing of deep hatred and division coming from this violence. One of the 3 poisons of the mind is delusion. The 3 are greed, hatred, and delusion. When greed, hatred, and delusion take over the mind, we are not awake. We are run by that programming. Delusion is believing something is true when it's not, or believing something isn't true when it is. And we can see here incredible consequences of his miscalculations. And we all miscalculate, every one of us. We all have different elements of delusion in our life. Believing things are true when they're not, believing they aren't true when they are. And of course, when we're out of balance, the universe has this intricate feedback system called pain. And so as we make our way through life, we're constantly readjusting according to the pain we're getting as feedback. As one of my teachers said, life is therapeutic irritation. When we feel that irritation, when we feel that pain, when we feel that clench, if we can turn toward it and examine it, look at it closely, and we'll see these 4 fundamental elements, according to Buddhist philosophy. First, we recognize that everyone feels stress and suffering and unsteadiness and unease. We recognize as well, if we look closely, that there's a cause of that pain, of that stress. And it has to do with attachment, identification, and holding on. The third thing we see is we can let go. And the fourth is we can see that there are practices, there are observations, there's a path that actually leads to an increasing potential for letting go of that imbalance and coming into a sense of balance again. And so the inquiry becomes, when we're battling delusion, when we're exploring greed and hatred, what do we really know to be true? Externally, we're told all forms of revisionist history that we grew up with. We have cultural norms that we tend to accept. And when it comes to seeing the nature of reality, of seeing what's really, really, absolutely, indisputably true, it's confusing. My Uncle Dave taught creative writing. I took a number of his courses. And he would really get on us about being truthful when you're right. I remember him saying, the sun doesn't rise, the earth turns. He said, the wind doesn't blow, it's being sucked to a lower pressure. Pay attention. I was pretty cool when I realized, yeah, that's right. I'm not watching the sunrise. I'm watching the earth turn. And every now and then, when I find my mind saying the wind is blowing, I remember, oh no, it's actually being pulled to a lower pressure. I once saw these birthing videos, and sort of that demonstrate, so how do you prepare for birth? What's it like to go through birth? And they gave these 2 examples. One was a couple in California, and then another was a couple in Michigan. The couple in California had the hot tub, they had the candles, they had the incense, they had the white lacy curtains blowing in the breeze, all calm and just preparing to kind of welcome this creature, into the world. The couple in Michigan were surrounded by their family. So this woman, just before she was giving birth, there are people walking in and out of her bedroom. There are people arguing in the bedroom. There are people yelling out to each other. There are people making jokes. And I thought, my God, what 2 different worlds this baby is coming into. When we come into the world, we're just picking everything up as osmosis, And I remember thinking, like, oh my God, the Michigan couple should be doing what the California couple is doing. But you know what? That's life. That's their life. And when we're little kids, so this is what life is like. So this is what I can expect. This is how I get attention. This is how I avoid pain. We formulate our perspective on life very, very early on. We're simply taking in information, interpreting it, figuring out how we can survive and how we can thrive. And much of what we're learning may not be that helpful. And so when we begin to take on practices that help us to wake up, we start noticing what's not true. We start looking at our assumptions in life, and we start to figure out is what I've assumed to be true actually true? And actually what's happening is we're engaging into something that we could call unlearning. Rumi has this beautiful quote about this. And this again is when you really want to wake up to what is true. He said, unlearning is the highest form of learning. Unlearning is the highest form of learning. It's about moving from your story about what life is like, unlearning the assumptions to find out what is true. This is not for the faint of heart. This has been described, as has been mentioned by so many people, as swimming upstream, swimming against your conditioning, the conditioning of others. So when you undertake this practice of mindfulness, of seeing clearly, it's about looking closer at the nature of reality itself. So then the question is, when you look, what do you see? What do you discover? A student once asked me after a class I was leading, she said, am I supposed to relax or am I supposed to pay attention? I was kind of stunned by the question for a moment, and I said, yes. But the follow-up question was, well, then what am I paying attention to? It's like, when I close my eyes, it's like a symphony going on in there. There are thoughts, there are sensations, there are moods, there's story, there's planning, there's review, there's sadness. What am I supposed to pay attention to? Awesome question. So I'd like to talk a little bit now about what it is we're paying attention to and what is it that actually happens when you actually move from focusing on the external world and focus more on the internal world. And there is a practice which sometimes for me is mind-blowingly powerful and sometimes for me really irritating. It's called noting or labeling. And what it is, it's about naming what is happening as it's happening. Now, one of the areas, or I should say the fundamental area where we are guided in this particular tradition of mindfulness, is to be aware of the body. Because the body only lives in the here and now. It's the mind that forecasts in the future and past. But the body becomes your doorway, becomes your portal into presence. There's no way I can do this teaching justice, but I want to give you a little sample of it because you might find it to be really helpful. And if you want more, just Google Shinzen Young, Shinzen Young, and his instructions on see, hear, feel. And just to tell you a little bit about what this practice is, when you close your eyes, we have five senses. And Buddhism actually says six senses. You've got sight, sound, feeling, taste, and smell, and then the mind is included as one of the organs because it's that which is cognizing and processing all that information. But the primary that we tend to notice is seeing, hearing, and feeling. So what we'll do in this short little Zen pop quiz of a meditation is to focus attention on the here and now, based on the three main senses of see, hear, and feel. Now, what happens is, like when I close my eyes, chances are I might get an image that just sort of arises. It might be I'm thinking about something and poof, there's an image. Or I might be aware of the light beyond my closed eyes. And when I notice that, I just simply say see. I'm acknowledging that that seeing is happening. Now, I might be aware, as I am right now, that yet another plane is coming by. So as I notice that, I simply note here. As I'm sitting, I'm also aware that for some reason, my attention kind of went to the soles of my feet. I can feel kind of like tingling in the soles of my feet, my heels. So here I would just simply note feel. Now, if you like, we'll just do this for a short period of time. If you like, you can close your eyes. And when you notice the phenomena of visuals, you'll say see. When you notice the phenomena of sound, you'll say hear. And when you notice the phenomena of feel or feeling or sensing, you'll use the word feel. So we'll take the next minute. You can close your eyes, slow down your breath. Imagine the sense of the observer and explore using see, hear, and feel. If your mind goes off into a story, again, bring your attention back, primarily noting the movement of awareness towards see, hear, feel, noting it or labeling it as you experience it. Now, as you're ready, you can deepen your breath. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes or you can remain with them closed. So I wish you could tell me your experience right now, but I'm going to imagine your experience. You may have found that to be helpful. To notice how when phenomena arises and you note it, sometimes by simply naming it, it kind of loses its charge. And then you'll notice over at some point, it might be a moment later or a few moments later, there'll be another arising of sensation from inside. You'll note that. And perhaps again, it sort of dissipates. And of course, you might notice that the more you kind of name what's going on, you're reinforcing who you are as the observer. And it's entirely possible that your mind got completely caught up in the technique, or you simply got caught up in the phenomena that was arising. When we're not aware, oftentimes what happens is, for example, if I notice the sound of the plane, I will move into a whole reactionary phase. And let's say I hear the plane, it has a quality of irritation inside attached to it. And then my mind will start going off on, I wonder if they're going to change the flight plans so the planes are no longer overhead. And how often are they doing that anyway? It seems like they're doing it more often than they were before. It's a real pain in the butt. I wonder if I could what if I moved somewhere else where there weren't any planes whatsoever? What would that be like? In Pali, that is called papancha, or it's the proliferation that happens. Just from the vibration of the plane, if I can't simply note it and sort of let it be, I will go way down a long track of adding content onto a very primary experience that is utterly impersonal to me. So you may find this technique helpful. See, hear, and feel are the primary things you're noting as they're happening. And notice what happens for you. You might find it to be a practice that it becomes a really powerful companion. You may find it to be something you might engage into from time to time when your mind is particularly unsteady. But I wanted to share this with you because it begins to point towards something really powerful. What is it that you notice when you pay attention inside? So when you undertake this mindfulness training, it's helpful to recall some of the classic teachings around what what happens inside. And this is really kind of one of the cornerstones of practice and really fundamental to this practice of inquiry, of asking yourself questions. And there are 4 foundations of awareness. The first foundation, the first area where you pay attention is this being mindful of the body, being aware of the body. See, hear, feel, taste, smell. This is utterly impersonal. It's just happening. It's neither good nor bad. It's vibration, it's sensation, it's particles and waves of aliveness. It's life force. It's prana. It's chi, it's ki, it's Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it. It's aliveness inside. Now, the second level, which is sort of built on that first level, is what we call mindfulness of feeling, or mindfulness of feeling tone. And here it becomes very interesting how this neither good nor bad experience of sensation will be interpreted by your mind as one of 3 things: pleasant, unpleasant, or in between. Oftentimes described as neither pleasant nor unpleasant. It's the whole neutral element. So for example, when I heard the sound of the plane, it was negative. It was an unpleasant sensation, which leads to the next foundation, and that is to be aware of the mind, to be aware of the mind itself. So what does it mean? What does mind mean? There's an element of mind which generates ideas and makes judgments. Oh, I hate the sound of that plane. There's another quality of mind which has to do with perception. It's sort of aware that it's aware of that of it being negative. And then there's another element that's sort of referred to as heart and mind together. It's kind of like beyond mind. It's sort of like how like awareness itself holds an experience. In Pali, manas is a quality of mind that's generating ideas and making judgments, comparing, judging, figuring things out. Vijnana is perception, and citta is heart and mind. Now, in order to practice self-observation, it calls on a quality of attention which we could think of as dispassionate self-observation, preferenceless self-observation, or as one of my teachers said, self-observation without judgment. In order to observe if the mind is calm or agitated or focused or distracted, you have to be dispassionate. Something in you has to be able to get a little bit of distance in order to name the experience itself. And this is a fascinating area to explore. It's about the difference between I am angry to I am aware of anger. What a different world. And this opens up all kinds of new possibilities in your life. To have that quality of the witness or the observer, of dispassionate self-observation, means there's a possibility that instead of being a reactive pinball machine, you can actually be more aware of how you would like to respond to life. So we have mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of the feeling or feeling tone, and then mindfulness of the mind and the movement of the mind, which leads to the fourth. The fourth is a little complex, but still really juicy because it points toward liberation. This is classically referred to as mindfulness of Dhamma, or you could say mindfulness of reality. So this is kind of complex, but here at this level of dispassionate observation, you start to see into the nature of the mind itself, into the nature of, we'll call here Buddhist psychology. In this level of awareness, you're noticing what is present, but you're also noticing what's absent. This kind of blew my mind when I ran across this, that part of here in awareness itself, you're aware of anger, but you're also aware of the absence of anger. You're aware of a wanting mind, but you're also aware of the satisfied mind. At this level of observation, you can notice how sensations and even thoughts themselves can be like little mice scampering from one hole to another. And you begin to notice over time that there's an awareness of the types of experiences. It's sort of sometimes described as like the patterns. You begin to see the patterns of experience. So here are some of the patterns that you see. I'm not going to dwell on these too long, but this is where the lists show up. Some people love the lists, and I actually find it quite fascinating that here's a tradition of such clarity of self-observation that they have recognized the 5 obstacles, the 5 aggregates, the 6 sense bases, the 7 factors of awakening, the 4 noble truths, on and on. But here you'll begin to notice that what actually occludes your awareness are these 5 obstacles. You begin to see that when there is hatred, anger, judgment, blame, when there is desire, wanting, fantasy, planning, when there is worry, when there's hypervigilance, when there's sloth or sleepiness or density, when there's doubt or self-judgment. When that is present, you begin to recognize, I can no longer see clearly because of this weather system of the mind. And being able to recognize, for example, to recognize doubt, to be able to note and name doubt means that you're breaking your relationship with it. Your capacity to name it doesn't mean it goes away, but you have suddenly shifted your relationship to it. Then you can explore how to work it, how to be with it. In that same way, from this perspective, you can begin to see what are called the 5 aggregates. You begin to see how first there's form, and then there's the feeling tone, then there's a perception of your experience, then the formation of thoughts and stories, and then consciousness, like that, which is aware of the whole gamut. So you get to watch, and again, you've got to be pretty still here, how there's form into feeling, aware of perception, aware of the formation, and then aware of the consciousness of it. You also, from here, get to recognize that there are 6 bases from which we perceive: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. So here, again, you open the sense doors and realize that there's a certain awareness that comes through vision, a certain awareness that comes through sound, a certain awareness that comes through smell, through taste, an awareness that comes through opening to the felt sense of the body. And you also get to be aware of the mind itself, this computer that's taking all this sensory data and packaging it in a way that the mind can understand and make sense of it, to determine if it's threatening, and to determine your relationship to it. There's also the 7 factors of awakening, which I'll spare you. Awareness of the 4 noble truths. All of this is part of what you notice when you close your eyes and you go inward. And what you'll notice, or certainly what I notice, is the more you relax, the more you feel. The more you feel, the more you notice your relationship to what's happening. Back to the big circle with a line through it. Imagine a big circle, horizontal line through it. Above the line is what you're aware of. Below the line is what you're not aware of. Everything that's unfelt, unseen, uncognized is waiting for you to recognize it. And so in this practice, you get to watch how your mind will move into commentary or narrative or how the mind can reconnect to the aliveness of the moment. It's kind of a miracle. And you can focus on any one of these. You can focus on pure sensation. You can focus on that second foundation of feeling tone, referred to in Pali as Vedana. And that is this quality of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. One teacher in particular, Utejaniya, when you do a retreat with him, that's your practice. Notice the response to your experience, the kind of the expansion and opening when it's pleasant, the closing and contraction when it's unpleasant, and kind of the listlessness or boredom of the mind when it's in between. You can pay attention to that. You can explore the mind, the movement of the mind. You can explore beliefs. You can explore the emotional experience. And you can pay attention to that whole level of simply observing which obstacle is present right now. Anger, greed, restlessness and worry, sloth and torpor, self-judgment. So this is indeed an internal symphony. And I remember being on a month-long retreat, and one of my interviews, my twice-a-week interview, every week I would meet with Jack Kornfield. Of course, I was very, very aware of wanting to be a good student and look good. So I spent an inordinate amount of time crafting my questions so that I would look open but not naive, and intelligent but not clever. And finally, I just sat down for one interview and I just said, it just keeps changing. I'm trying to come up with fresh questions, but it's all shifting. And that was a very powerful insight, is that it's all changing. If you look, you will begin to recognize that another one of the dhammas, which I didn't mention, are these three characteristics of reality. You begin to notice that anything that has arisen out of causes and conditions is going to change. This impermanence is a quality of reality. You begin to see that how you're relating to it depends on how much you're going to suffer. Anything you hold on to is going to result in rope burn. Anything you can let go of will have a sense of ease. And the third characteristic of reality is it points toward this idea of the self. What is the self that's observing? That there is a quality of self which is also born out of conditions, the body. This body's changing, it's going to fall away. Our thoughts are changing, they're going to fall away along with the body. And it points toward, is there something beyond a changing self? What is that? So with all this focus on what's changing, every now and then we can ask ourselves, well, what is it that's actually paying attention right now? What is that knowing element, the cognizing of something that's happening? Or has been said, well, what is the one who knows? I'm aware that I need more time than what my talk allows, but I want to share the story with you. I was in the Peace Corps in West Africa, and I taught in a university, the University of Niamey in Niger, in West Africa. And I taught on the other side of the river. On one side of the Niger River was the capital city of Niamey, and the University of Niamey was on the other side of the river. And so to get there, you had to cross what's called the Pont JF Kennedy, the JF Kennedy Bridge, which was a 2-lane bridge, which was just an unreal experience because it had massive trucks, huge dump trucks, buses, cars, motorcycles, mopeds, camels, burros, pedestrians, bicycles, all happening. It was an amazing experience every day. And quite often there would be these camel trains that would be bringing firewood into the city, and it would be all packed up on either side of the camel train. And on my motorcycle, I would often get down really, really low with my head just above the handlebars, so I could sort of scoot along underneath the bundles of wood on either side of the camel, looking for the errant piece of wood that might snag me. At the end of the day, I was heading out to the parking lot and getting on my motorcycle. I noticed that one of the other teachers had just left, was driving down there. And I thought to myself, oh, I so wanted to talk to him. And this little voice inside said, you'll see him on the bridge. Something terrible just happened. It's a very clear voice. And I thought, what could that possibly be? But I noticed it and I kind of neglected it, and then I kind of went on. I hopped on my motorcycle, and as I'm driving toward the bridge, everything was backed up. And as I drove along, I did indeed see my professor friend, and I went on. And because, again, I had a motorcycle, I kind of picked my way up over the bridge. And as I headed up toward the crest of the bridge, I saw this bicycle that was crushed. And I saw this young boy, I'm guessing maybe 14 or 15, who at first I thought was sleeping. And then I saw kind of this trickle of blood. And then I noticed just the screaming, people yelling at each other, people pointing fingers and accusing. And this poor young guy had been hit by one of the big trucks. Now, a really interesting thing was, I'm just standing there watching, and I couldn't get by. And this thought occurred to me as I'm watching. I thought, no one's praying for him. And I just offered a little prayer. And I I felt this sort of like confused energy flying around. And I just said, kind of wordlessly said, like, you're dead, you can't go back. And I just heard this little voice in my ear just saying, merci, and poof, like a disappearance. Okay, that's a really woo-woo story. And the second part of that, like, who knows if I made that up, but it felt so real to me. I was like ice cold with tingling when I felt that presence. How did I know? How did that voice say, you'll catch up to him on the bridge, something terrible happened? I don't know. I really don't know. It points, though, to what it means just to reflect on that knowing faculty. What is it that knows? So what was going on in my experience when I had that thought? And I think the biggest factor, as I look back on it, was I had no expectations. That totally came out of the blue. I had no preferences. Now, the more you observe without preference, the more clearly you'll see what's happening as it's happening. And the more you'll strengthen what some call the witness, that sense of the observer. Again, the observer is this unblinking, non-preferential, non-judging, not wanting it any different quality of awareness. We develop it through paying attention. Now, what gets in the way of knowing is three things. It's the comparing mind, the judging mind, and the trying to figure things out mind. What helps open it up? Not comparing, not judging, not trying to figure things out. Ajahn Chah is considered one of the primary root teachers in this tradition. And he talked about this practice as awakening the one who knows. So what is this? We can think of this as original mind, kind of unfettered, unconditioned mind. Some think of it as the silent witness, that unblinking awareness in the background. Some think of it as spacious consciousness. This tradition speaks of insight. I just keep glancing at the time. There's so much more I wanted to say here. Insight is seeing clearly. It's getting under your preferences. It's getting to the truth of things. It's really seeing penetrating insights into the nature of reality. That's what arises in this practice. So we have just a few minutes before we close. Why don't we close with a short meditation? You might, with your eyes closed, just feel the breath. And in your own way, feel or imagine the sense of the witness, the sense of the observer. You might recall this practice of noting. See, hear, and feel. And take a moment just to open to this sense of observation. And you might ask yourself, who is the one who knows? What is this knowing faculty? And you might just sense for a moment, who is present? What is the quality of presence in the absence of comparing? What is this presence in the absence of judging? What is this presence in the absence of trying to figure anything out? And can you imagine for a moment the unconditioned quality of presence, space? With all that arises internally, sensations, feeling tone, thoughts, the recognition of patterns, can you sense a quality now of what we might call loving awareness? Awake at the same time, deeply allowing. You might take 3 slow breaths. Notice if you could relax, if you could allow. And in your own way, just sense of just for a moment this quality of the one who knows. As you're ready, you can deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes if you have not already. I hope you found this helpful. In order to be truly free in this life, to really cultivate those penetrating insights into the nature of reality, it's critical we develop this capacity for self-observation without judgment. That we become more intimately aware of kind of the mechanics of what arises internally, and to very gently begin to train our attention to step back, to not only sense who you are as the one who's aware, but also to open into the mystery. As one teacher put it so beautifully, it's all about loving the mystery. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention. and blessings to you in your practice.